Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Harold George. I am the Extension Services Manager for the St. Johns County Public Library System, and it is such an honor and pleasure to introduce today best-selling author Mary Alice Monroe. We are so grateful that you've joined us. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Always a great pleasure to come to see you. I remember you so well, so I'm looking forward to
it's very generous, and the fact that we got to see you speak at the Florida Library Association last year, it has been a changing force for a lot of people here in the state. And so I'll definitely touch upon that. But one of the things I want to say congratulations, because as a lot of us aren't surprised, this book has definitely found a lot of great success. And one of the things that, okay, so I'm going to come clean here. I struggle choosing fiction. It's not that I don't like fiction. And I want to put a shout out to Karen Maxwell, who will see this, and she makes fun of me because I was the leader of a book club, and they would put nonfiction into it just to make it easier for me. But but once I've been assigned a piece of fiction, and you know, beach reads is a genre that you find yourself probably put into. And I think sometimes people think beach reads, well, that's along with chick lit. How can there be quality literature in those things? And that's such a mistake. And I've made that mistake. And I want to come clean about that, because as soon as I opened this book, I just got chills when I read the poem at the start that talks about essentially the ancient process and travels and from birth to life to rebirth of the sea turtle. And a little bird told me that actually, as many books as you have published, this is your first poem that you have published. So how did that experience go for you? How did you feel about the fact that this was something that was this a comfort zone issue for you?
It was a comfort zone. I know how to write fiction. It's what I do. And let me back up by saying thank you about the comment about beach reads. I like that my books come out in the summer because I write about so many marine animals. That's what I do. I work with the animals. So I think my readers who know who I am know that it's going to be accurate and confirm science. And I know I am a turtle lady. I am still on the turtle team, 20 years, on the board of the aquarium. I work with turtles. That said, the fiction, when I write the fiction, I know I've always been a novelist. I've been a storyteller since I was born. I really believe that. I can't remember a time I haven't written. My poetry, I've been shy about. I never took a class. I never studied, but I'm an avid reader of poetry. When I read, when I am currently writing a novel, I don't like to read fiction. Interestingly, audiobooks are changing things a little bit for me. I don't want, when I read the words of another fiction author, it makes me think about the art of writing. And I don't want that in my head when I'm writing my own voice, because it plays, you know, their words are playing in your head. Not a good thing. Trust your own voice, your own experiences. So when I am writing a novel, I read poetry because I think it's actually the highest form of writing. It is distilled, it's pure. Or as W. Dickinson says, tell it slant. It's such a big subject sometimes they dive into that you can't hit it. You can't just talk about it. You have to go in from different paths to tell that what you really mean. And so I write poetry for myself. And it's just pleasure. And I never thought it was very good. I just have been very shy about showing it. But then I read one of my all-time favorite novels of all time, Where the Crawdads Sing. And I know Delia. And I'm so inspired that she put her poetry in the book. In fact, it's so good. I was going to look up the name of the poet so I could read that poet's writing. And it was Delia. And that said, Mary Alice, Delia's first book, she just put the poetry right in there, the courage. So what are you waiting for? So when I looked at this poem, which I think says everything I wanted to say about the beauty, the majesty of a sea turtle who swims along the North Atlantic Gyre, who travels, we know they travel across the, the ocean, but they also roam just along our coastline a lot too. But they go back to the area of their birth to lay that nest, that instinct. It's such a beautiful story and imagery that I think this poem says, I've been working on it, I hate to say it, for like 10 years. So I'm very pleased with it. And I'll read it if you like.
Absolutely. That would be wonderful.
Can you hear my sound? Okay. Absolutely. The poem is at the beginning of On Ocean Boulevard, and it is as you said, it is the first poem I've ever published, and it's called Odyssey. The sea is thick and murky. Can you see me? I am propelled forward, swept in spiraling swift water. The great current carries me. It writhes along the coastline, swirls around the great gyre, churns past vast sargassum weed. The current snakes from south to north, a supernatural force pushing me forward, always onward. I am a loggerhead. I've journeyed far in this vast ocean, servant to my magnetic compass. Now a voice calls to me in the current. It is the voice of my ancestors, an instinct that has guided mothers generation after generation for 200 million years. I heed the call. I spread my beautiful flippers as strange forces gain strength in my soul, compelling me westward. Light shimmers above, then grows dark. Aqua to indigo, over and over on this odyssey. Hunger gnaws at my belly as I swim through the broth of drifting plankton. I push past gangly gliding invertebrates, beyond the wrecked fish and sea bream that share space beneath a gilt rock, laden with pink coral and bright anemones. I am riding a river of current, sliding in watery thermals, warmed by the sun, powered by the earth's rotation. I am soaring through liquid wind, returning to the beach of my birth. I am swimming, swimming, swimming home. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. So we will be talking more about your book in a moment, but at some point during the interview, I always like to ask someone what I would say is, what is the aha moment? And so for you, the aha question that I had was, when did you find that you had such a deep interest and care for the sea turtles, and what brought you to that discovery?
It's interesting. It started in Florida. My sister has a home in Florida, and Floridians know turtles. Let's be honest. We have Floridas in South Carolina, but the mecca for the loggerhead sea turtles is Florida. And of course, now you have the greens and the leatherbacks on an uptick, so it's all very exciting. And my sister, who's a painter, called me about 20 years ago. It's fast how time goes. It's amazing. Time goes by fast now. And she said, Mary Alice, I had a dinner party, and she proceeded to tell me about a sea turtle coming ashore to lay the eggs on the beach outside her house. And how and the Floridians were very mindful. They know sea turtles, were quiet and respectful and watched. But as a painter, she described to me how the tears came down the eyes. Now, I was in Washington, D.C. at the time. My husband was at the NIH, and there were no turtles in D.C. But the metaphor of a female, a mother, crying at birth made me shake. It's like a hum. And so I knew I wanted to write a book. Eventually, my husband moved to Charleston for his position, and we bought a house on Isle of Palms. 21 years ago. We'd been going to Isle of Palms regularly, but we finally were able to move permanently. And the first thing I did was join the island turtle team because I was curious about this ancient mariner, this sea turtle. And this was 1998. And back then there wasn't a lot of talk about sea turtles. There were no sea turtle hospitals. And research was still pretty much in its infancy and a lot of light disorientation. And as I worked with the turtles, and I was certified on that first year the team formed on Isle of Palms and Sullivan's Island, we had so much to learn. It was a very exciting time. But there's also a time when sea turtle excluded devices, they're called TEDs, were not on the shrimp boats. And the light disorientation was happening a lot. And as I was working on the beach with the tourists that came in, tourists from South Carolina and locals as well as from off, they had an interest in the turtles. And I was very keenly aware that this was not idle curiosity. People really wanted to learn. How can I help? And so I thought to myself, I can use my books as a force for good. You know, I'm not going to write nonfiction. That's not what I am. I'm a storyteller. But why can't I find a way to bring my readers to where I am, to experience what I experience with my passion? So I changed the way I wrote novels completely. I have a system where now I choose a species first. I don't have a story. I choose the species first. I look, for example, turtles. I didn't have a story. I just wanted to write about the backdrop of turtles. And instead of using archetypal themes, which is what I had done, I'd written 5 novels. I decided to create themes around what I learned. What were the main things I learned about sea turtles? And an example would be, like in Ocean Boulevard, you see this happen all the time. A sea turtle returns to the beach of its birth, well, now the area of its birth. So I knew the theme would be about return, a woman returning after a long absence. When a sea turtle, which is a reptile, lays her eggs some 20 inches down, deposits 50 to 150 eggs and goes off, she never returns to the nest. That's her biological motto. But we're mammals, we're humans. So how do I transfer that emotion to humanity, to humans? Abandonment. So I knew that that would be the theme of a girl, a woman feeling abandoned by her family. So I used all the themes. A lot of eggs, someone in the book would be pregnant. Someone was going to be pregnant. And so I created a story based on how I could create a world. So rather than just tell a bunch of turtle facts, I could bring my reader into the phenomenon of the sea turtle nesting saga. They feel it more. And the characters were, of course, the mother-daughter, but also the mother was a turtle lady. So you could come to my world. That was The Beach House. And that was my first New York Times hit. And it was because of the success of that book. And no one had ever written a book like it. No one had ever, the turtle teams went nuts for it. I am so grateful to Florida. Florida put me on the map because turtle teams all along the coast were like, they'd never seen a book like this. They loved their turtles. And this told the story about how a mother and a daughter could reconcile against the backdrop of the seasons, the continual return, that the cycle of life is how I like to put it. So I was able to continue, and it's been 20 years, and I've written a body of work now that are all set against species that I don't write about monarch butterflies, I don't write about pelicans, but the books are set against that backdrop. So my reader promise is that the readers will continue learning about families and emotions. That's what they come to the books for. But they will also come away with a little bit more knowledge. And I think The Beach House in particular, that series, I'm blessed. People love this family. It's like Jan Carone, move over. She's written 15. I've only written 7, so I have a lot more to go.
Well, I'll tell you one of the things I love about Ocean Boulevard on Ocean Boulevard, I should say, is at the beginning of each chapter, you include information about the world of the sea turtle, or laws, or how humans are impacting the lives of the creatures as well. I have a friend who belongs to the Sea Turtle Patrol here in St. Johns County, and we often talk about it. He just talks about how interesting and cool it is, which I have no doubt. But getting to read the section where you're two, what is actually a very romantic moment is interrupted, so to speak, by the hatching and the boil of the sea turtles, and it's even a greater romantic moment, really. And watching how they come and how they escape and they travel to the sea.
Yeah,
that's something no one's been able to describe as well, and it was really exciting. I mean, fortunately I grew up close to the beach, so nighttime beach hangouts, and moonlight on the beach and the things we've experienced. But that is not something I've ever seen before. Of course, now.
Thank you. I'm very delighted to hear that. Well, to go back to the chapter headings, I have a lot of knowledge about the sea turtles. That's my work. But I know that I consider it sloppy writing when any writer just dumps facts because they're kind of proud they know it. It's like, to my mind, one of the things I loved about Ray the Crawdancing, again, is that she is so well-versed in the landscape as well as animal behavior that it just flows into the book. And that's how I feel I've been trying to do for 20 years, is let the story unfold in a natural way. Let the landscape be viewed from the point of view of the character so it has emotion and meaning. It's not just a travel log. So knowing that I wanted to also impart information, I created chapter headings. So that gives the reader the choice. If you want to know these facts, there they are. And I actually choose the chapter heading to try to blend in with the action of the chapter, which is harder than you think. And yet I've had readers write to me and say, I was reading swimming lessons and I skipped the chapter headings because I wanted to know the story. But by chapter 7, I fell so in love with the turtles, I went back and read all the chapter headings. And I'm like, yes, because I believe that it enhances the story. It deepens one's appreciation of the book if they know what the characters are passionate about. It's part of the setting.
And in the world of acting, you would say you see a big part of their motivation, what means so much to them.
Yes.
I was asking a few friends, if they had read your books, and if they did, what they liked about them. And I had one friend, which she talked about the Low Country series and the story of sisters, the half sisters. And it really touched her because she has several stepsisters. And she said that really helped her. She enjoyed it because of that, and also it helped her to see her own story, her own life in a different way. But she also said because you could really tell how much that you loved the South and the sea and nature, and that we really sometimes, here we live so close to the coast here in St. Augustine, and it's so easy to take it for granted. But getting to my whole point, sorry, it's taking so long.
No, I'm fascinated.
When people talk, we talk about, we've all done a lot of binge watching lately of television shows, those of us who probably should be doing something better with our time, but this is what we're doing to keep ourselves sane. And we talk about the different things or shows or movies we like and series. And often the best way I can describe a couple of them is like, I like spending time with those characters. It's not about whether the show is good so much. And I really liked hanging out with some of the characters. I really enjoyed the banter of the first dinner between Gordon and Lydia. And I love the fact that you talked about the surf rider. I'm like, that's something I've heard of.
Well, I love that you say that, because the more that I write this particular series, the more people, the audience is growing and growing and growing. And it's because they love this family, this historic Charleston family. And what's interesting is I always say with this series, as opposed to the Low Country series that you just mentioned, I approached both differently. When I wrote the Low Country series, I wrote it so that you should read that series. Summer Girls, Summer Winds, Summer's End, in that order. And the whole story follows. Sort of like the Hunger Games. You've got to read the series in the correct order. When I wrote The Beach House, I never wrote it intentionally as a series. And subsequently, every time I wrote a Beach House book, it was a standalone novel. You could pick up one book and you don't have to have known anything else. However, that said, I decided long ago that I would, for example, when we began the Sea Turtle Hospital in 2007 for the South Carolina Aquarium, I was there. I was there with the boxes and cutting up fish and trying to find a place to put the turtle. And I thought, this is really cool. I want to share this with my readers, because if it interests me, I think it's going to interest my readers. So it was 3 or 4 years after 2003, 4 or 5. It was 5 years after I wrote The Beach House. And I used the same family, but I made them all 5 years older. And subsequently, now since 2002, when the first book came out and Kara was 40, and Linnea, the young woman in On Ocean Boulevard, was 8. Now Kara's 56 years old, and Linnea's 23. And we've watched these people grow. We've seen the marriages, the deaths, the births. And in On Ocean Boulevard, what I loved about this particular book was Kara, who came home at 40, when I told you 20 years she'd been gone, mother-daughter reconciliation in the beach house. And over the years, we've seen her marriage, and she found in death and grief and rebirth. And here she is book opens up and she's getting married again at 56. And what I love about this story is, in this story, you see a woman assuming her position, even as young at 56, but assuming the role of matriarch in this family.
And I love the connection she has with her brother.
Well, that's another really interesting story. In this book, you have a woman and her brother who's an alcoholic, a recovering alcoholic, and he slips. And I think what was so beautiful about this story is she had his back. She knew who he was. Right. And Linnea, when she came home, the opening of the book is this young 23-year-old woman coming home from, of all places, California, where she went off as an environmentalist in a blaze of independence. But you see her coming home now, and her tail's between her legs. And she lost her job. She broke up with her boyfriend. She has no money. You go home. You have no place else to go. So you have this uncomfortable situation of a young woman living with her parents again. And I think what's interesting is that when I wrote this book a year ago, I didn't know the coronavirus pandemic was going to hit. And here I have a novel of a illness that comes in that surprises them, devastates all the plans of the family, throws everything in an uproar. And yet what I write about is families. I always have a family struggle, a woman and her husband, her daughter, her niece, family. And you see this family dealing with illness, with reoccurring alcoholism, bankruptcy, a young woman with no job, insecurity. They have commitment. They dig deep to find the loyalty, the love. And of course, the young ones are trying to figure it out too. There's the young stuff going on a lot. But in the end, it's that wise woman, the old crone. And I always, in my books, I have the old crone. And I'm getting to be an old crone. I say that with great pride. And the old crone, you know, in literature is always the wise woman.
That's right.
And the crone is well respected. And Kara becomes a crone because she's earned that position.
She's a survivor.
She's a survivor. And she's looking at the young one saying, it's my turn to look at you and how can I help you? And isn't that what we're kind of going through now, right now in our lives? Hope. It's always about hope, isn't it?
And it is, and it's those connections. And again, like, I'm not an anti-fiction person at all. I think my problem is trying to figure out where to start. You know, it's easy with nonfiction. You always know what subjects you like and all, but every now and then a book will, and there's like, you know, and I'll see things in loops. So, you know, because I was going to have this great, lucky honor to talk to you today, like, I have to look at this book. I need to read it. And it's been surprising the ways that it has connected. And of course, all readers imprint, I should say, something of their own life upon what they read. You know, I went to California when I was 23. Things did not work.
No kidding.
I had to come back home and start over. But really, one of the things that I was doing a little bit of research about the book or about yourself and your writing, and I was joking. I was like, I would find myself over here reading about something that was not related at all to what I was doing, but it was such a pleasure. But one of my favorite memories as a child is the beach house that my parents rented when I was 7. We are a large family. There were 8 of us crammed into this little cottage. I have an excellent memory. I can tell you so many things about much younger days. But what I don't really remember a lot about that, it's the impressions of the beach and the rocks and that feeling of sun and salt that you're so tired, but it's satisfying as opposed to tiring. And just the fact that the cycle of the day is built upon nature as opposed to
sun.
And I got a lot of that from this book. And also this book really made me think a lot about my dad, who wasn't actually there that week because he was back home working so he could pay for it.
Sure.
It was about those long distances, and like looking back, and I'm like, wow, that was 30 years ago. What have I been up to? So I thank you for that. And another book that I really loved that I found, like, in connection in my research, was Pat Conroy's Beach Music. And I see that, you know, when I'm reading the comments, that you've got a lot of praise from Mr. Conroy. And I think there really is, you know, in the art world, we have the Hudson Valley painters. And now I'm thinking we have the South Carolina writers. And that must be a special group to belong to, because I see that you've been able to connect with them through your work and reading.
It's true. Pat was kind of a leader. It's a crown he never wanted to wear, but he did. I was very fortunate to call him friend after a while. It took me a while to get just past the awe that I felt when he walked in the room. When a lot of people, it's interesting, one of the last big conversations or events that he did was mine. I do a Wild Dunes event every year at Wild Dunes Resort on Isle of Palms. And I had him and his wife, Cassandra, who's my friend. And for 10 years, I begged him, won't you come, won't you come, won't you come? And he didn't like to. You know, towards the end, he just really didn't want to, but he came. He said, I don't know why I can't say no to her. Finally, he said yes. But it was one of his very last conversations. And it was 500 people at night, men and women, and you could have heard a pin drop. And he loved it. Cassandra was his straight man. And if you haven't read Cassandra King Conroy's, oh my gosh, the memoir of Tell Me a Story. It's her memoir of Pat Conroy and her life.
On the list.
Oh, it is so beautiful. I am a friend of Cassandra, and I felt like I was sitting on the sofa with her, and she was telling me stories I had not heard. She really opened up. But at any rate, that night, Pat's humor, oh my God, he's so funny. And, you know, everyone thinks of Pat as the writer of The Great Santini and that dysfunctional family. And I respect him because he talked openly in Charleston about his family illness, mental health, which I respected because the more you talk about it, the more everyone realizes, as he said to me, Mary Alice is crazy in every family. And he's absolutely right. And yet what I loved about him as a writer was we both loved the Low Country and the landscape. And we had that in common. And he's haunting me. I know what he wants me to write.
in our artwork that we have here, we have the rushes of the marsh, and it's so funny. As a kid, we drove past these all the time, and my mom would always slow down because she said it was one of her favorite things, and I just didn't get it as a child. And she would talk about the, and then as I got older and I got to go along for fishing and so forth, you would see just the world, the life that lived in these barrier islands and along these little shores. And it really does, it's one of those places, if you just stay there long enough, everything in your system and your soul will straighten and align.
And you know what I think of, Harold? I think you put your finger on it, though, a little while ago, when you said you take it for granted. I think people who, anywhere you live, anywhere there's beauty in nature. It's easy to step out on the beach and be fascinated. I'm up in the mountains, and it's the murmurs of the trees, the leaves, there's nothing like it. But I say to people, and the reason I write is we are longing for connection with nature. Our ancestors had it. We don't know what is wild. We see the outdoors for the most part on very guided paths or through glass or screen. The sense of being connected to the breeze on the face and just to pause and get up in the morning at dawn and listen to the trees and watch the sunrise. No connection, no plugging in, just alone. The dawn song or the sunset. Just that connection, knowing what that big bird going keening in the sky. Oh, that's a red-tailed hawk. I recognize that bird. By recognizing the bird, you are intimate with it. You're connected. And I think that through my books, like in the Low Country series, for example, we all love dolphins. We all want to touch and feed that dolphin because that's what mammals do. Humans like to touch, touch, touch. Here, have a cookie. Let me feed you. It's out of a generous.
We think we're the only nurturers.
Yeah, I mean, I think we want to be kind to the animals. We love them.
Sorry, wives.
Oh, sorry. But in truth, I hope through my stories, people get to know and trust their instincts, that to trust the silence, to trust the connection is there without touch, because that's how animals communicate. And I think that if you trust that instinct and you go outside to the beach, you go out to your backyard and look at your beautiful flower that you planted. I love to look at what I planted. How big did my little pepper get today? Simple things. It's the simple connections that makes the difference. Sorry. I'm trying to turn off my phone.
I'm trying to connect, right? Well, I think on Ocean Boulevard, you parallel how these family members are connecting, have been connected forever, but sometimes are having to reconnect in a different way.
Yes.
And it's paralleled along with what's happening in their connection to nature and the ocean. I love some of the conversations between Lydia and her mother and how she's supporting her mother's effort at this endeavor that she has with her portfolio, and the conversation she has about finding a space. You even reference Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own. And so it made me think, because you're a parent, you didn't necessarily always have time for yourself. Did you have a hard time carving out that space when you were writing?
What a good question. I did. I talk about this to young writers a lot too. And just so I have to point out that I think that whole relationship with the mother and the daughter is so powerful, because there's often a dance mothers have with their children throughout their entire lives, but especially daughters, where they think I think daughters, for the most part, think their mothers are idiots most of the time, that they need to save their mothers. But that's a part of it. They really, that connection, that's communication. And I work harder actually on the emotional psychological development of my characters than I do on the environmental. That excites me, but the stories are about the people. And when Linnea saw her mother's, and children often see their mothers, you know, very clearly, her inability to step forward on her own behalf, she encouraged her and to find her own space and not always make that space available to the family. And I know that when I was a young writer, that was hard for me to find time and place to write a book. And we didn't have a great deal of money. My husband was in medical school, and I had a you know, the card table that you pull the legs out. It's very wobbly with a Selectric. That's how old I am. I had a Selectric typewriter. And anyone out there who knows that Selectric, when the cartridge bangs, the whole table went like this. And when I cut and paste, it was seriously cutting with scissors and taping. Oh, I wish I had that manuscript because it was a work of art. I learned, I was actually under contract, and I actually was writing, I signed a contract for 2 books that year. You know, and I was sobbing because my children were, I had a 6-year-old who just started 1st grade. So I had it all worked out, you know, I would leave and go to school. And I remember I called my friend, and that friend at the time was Nora Roberts, who's today a giant. And she was probably the most disciplined writer I ever knew. And I said, oh, what am I going to do? You know, the kids come and they interrupt my work, and how am I going to write 2 books? Poor me. Nora had none of it. She had no sympathy for not having respect for your work. And part of having respect for your work is to create a place that's sacred. And that is, whether it's an office like I'm in, this is my office, and it's spacious, and I spend 12 hours a day in here. But back then, it was a corner in my bedroom, and I put up a little screen to separate it from the bed. And you don't put laundry in that space? You don't put any. Like, yes. Not the laundry. It's not the size of the desk as Stephen King wrote about on writing. It's that it's sacred, that it's private, that only your work goes on right now. You get not emails, not letters, not stirring spaghetti, nothing. This is work time. And Nora told me to put a sign on my door. Is it blood or fire? If not, go away. Because, and I was like, oh, I could never do that. And she said, no, it means during these 3 hours or 1 hour or whatever amount of time you dedicate to your craft, no matter what your craft is, during that hour, if someone needs peanut butter or wants to ask you a question, not in that hour. That's mama's time. Because it shows not only you have respect for your own work, but the children have to learn, or your husband has to learn respect for that time. And it doesn't matter how long, as long as it's productive.
You know, I just watched Michelle Obama's Becoming, the documentary about her book tour. And she talks about, she was getting mad because she had 2 small children, and the president's going off to the gym. And finally someone said,
oh, yes, yes.
You need to go to the gym too. It was like, you know, you need to make it work for you as well. So
it's so funny. Right now, I have been in the last few years writing rather intensely because my work involves so much animal research that I'm either with the animals or I'm writing a book. That's my life. And in the last year, it's been rather sedentary. You know, in COVID thing, I've been home. And sitting around and not, you know, cooking more. I think a lot of us can understand what's been the COVID-19, we're calling it. We're all putting it on. And my daughter is very unsympathetic. She said, Mom, you just take the hour. Like Obama said, you just create that and put it on your schedule and you do it.
That's right.
So I think that's the way, it's discipline, isn't it?
Well, you know, I appreciate that But, we talk about this beach reads genre that I have a newfound appreciation for, I will be honest. Because within this, I mean, my oldest brother is a big fan of historical fiction, and he is right. You can learn a lot from that. But of course, I'd be like, well, then why don't you read the history? But, it's all about connecting with characters and so forth. But
Yes.
little, the pieces of information that one could come across. Of course, the Surfrider International, I did know about because we are in a pretty surfer heavy town.
Yes.
And somehow in the past 2 years, I missed out on the fact that the city of Charleston had passed a resolution apologizing for its role in the slave trade, as well as the plans for the African American Museum, which,
That's powerful.
everything's been so busy. So I'm like, I can't believe I missed out on that. And then I think, what perfect timing. You have this book that has a family knocked for a loop by an illness, but also that you mentioned this in a conversation between two of the main characters. And there's no way to plan for that, I imagine. But you must be really, I guess, grateful when you find that the relevance of your book, along with everything you've already planned, pops into view.
Joseph Campbell, who I studied quite a bit a while back, but a phrase that he said that I repeat this often, is that he said, writers or artists of today are the shamans of today. And I think my experience has been that's true, that if you do take time to go outdoors and connect to a higher power, I call it prayer. It is a kind of prayer. The church is, the cathedral of the forest or the beach or the earth. And if you listen, you hear. And I believe if you put your ear to the ground, when I said to you, I felt the hum. I feel that about certain issues, and it's almost prescient. I don't think I'm unique. I believe we all have this ability if we choose to encourage it and to let it grow, and also to just believe in it. Because in our technological society, it's often poo-pooed a bit. It's woo-woo, or it's kind of crazy. No, I think if you trust your instincts and you listen and you have the courage to put the words out on either your orally or on paper, or express your art form in any way you can. That's your duty as an artist today. If you're lucky enough to capture the fire, it's your responsibility to bring the fire to your tribe. And that's how I feel about my books. I think also, in one of the things on Ocean Boulevard that I wrote about that I'm very proud of, is for years I wanted to talk about this plastics in the ocean. And Florida sees that all the time. And it's not a touchy-feely topic. How do you write about plastics without turning everybody off? Even climate change is the subject that no one really wants to read about in a novel. And I think I touched on it in a way on Ocean Boulevard, where it was just an inspiration. And I did it where Linnea sees someone walking down, and this is a true story, walking down the beach with a plastic bag, a big garbage bag, and picking up one piece of trash, as she walks. And she thought, hey, that's a cool idea. I can do that. So she did. And ultimately, she created this beach mesh bag for the beach sweep, which was very successful. And in fact, truth and fiction is often intertwined. I worked with the South Carolina Aquarium to create that bag for the beach sweeps or for park sweeps, for anyone who wants to pick up litter. And it's been very successful. And I'm so honored and pleased, because I am a big believer, Harold, of lighting one candle. And I have that group. And let me invite everyone to come to Light One Candle. It's a Facebook group on my Facebook page, Mary Alice Monroe Group. Light with the numeral 1 candle. And it's when I'm on tour and I talk to readers and they love the story and they're buying the book because they want to know about the family. But they are catching on to the environmental backdrop and they say, I don't know what to do. Climate change is so big, especially now with COVID going on. It's like, oh, don't cloud my brain. I've got so much to worry about. And my response to that is, don't worry about the whole world. Don't worry about that floating island in the Atlantic Ocean. Light one candle. What can you do? Just yourself. What can you do in your life? If you pick up one piece of trash a day, you've lit a candle. If you say no to the plastic straw, you've lit a candle. And I think if we all just do one thing a day, it empowers us. And that's what Linnea felt. The more she was able to act, the stronger she became, the more sure of herself in this crazy world. It's empowering because fear freezes. That's a very animal thing. It's fight or flight.
Right.
Stand still if you're afraid. And so we are often prey in the wild. So we freeze for a minute and then we run. I think action keeps us from freezing.
One of the things that really, really impressed me when I saw you speak at the Florida Library Association conference back in May of 2019 is that you spoke about climate change and global warming, which is not a topic that anybody expects as the keynote speaker at the beginning of a conference of librarians. But you did it in such a way that reminded us, and I felt really inspired and privileged that you said, information professionals, everybody that works for the library world is well positioned to play a role in the mitigation of this experience. Mm-hmm. And it reminded me of the old cliche, like, because you can only do something small doesn't mean you should do nothing at all. And I think that really, you see that message. And I do think about, was it Pandora? She picked up that bottle. Like,
yes!
A simple act of a character that we may not spend a lot of time with, but it stands out.
Well, she's a classic character. I love Pandora. I mean, for those who have not read the book, there are two young women, different economic groups, and I wanted to bring in the young with this book. So it's because they're the ones, they're rural, and it's also, that's an area, we all love to see what those youngins are doing, but Kara, meanwhile, it's a multi-generational novel. And Pandora is the woman who you kind of love to hate. I see her as someone with a great possible future, depending on the choices she makes right now. She's got it all, seemingly, but she can also be very selfish. We all know who Pandora, we all know a Pandora. But when she picked up that one piece of plastic, that one bottle, it was her looking at, I don't have to dump money at it, which is the solution. I think a lot of people feel if they just give money, they don't have to worry about anything. But I don't think that's, and it's important. Oh my gosh, is it important to support the groups that you believe in. I do the same thing, 100%. But sometimes you want to do something that is your own.
You want to walk the walk and talk the talk.
Yes, that's personal. That makes you feel, oh, I feel good today. And in a way, every book that I write is my lighting one candle. That's how I look at it. I work hard at it. And to me, like the book I'm writing another beach house book right now, Harold. And I did it not because of the environmental issue this time. It's more that I see this family in what's going on this summer, this family's going to feel. And I want to be in there with this family and talk about, it's not about COVID-19. I don't think anyone wants to read about sickness, but it's about how we persevere. They say the tide floats all boats.
Right.
But right now, we are waiting for the tide to come in. We're waiting. And I think that's an interesting place for humans to be in. My niece moved in with me. She's in the hospitality industry, has no job. So she moved in. My daughter was getting married in June. Big wedding, canceled.
Same
You
thing.
know, it's art imitating life or life imitating art, but it's what we're dealing with. Families scared about their income. And this is not just a pandemic. This is families learning new ways of interacting with each other, interacting with their friends, big decisions being made in personal families. And that's what I write about. How are these families getting through this now?
I keep thinking of the rings of a tree, and that this year will definitely be in everybody's life. Much like the 1918 flu, even it changed so many people, and everybody has someone in their family that this has there will be many people fortunate enough not to lose someone. There are people, sadly, who have, but everybody's touched by this experience. One of the things that I thought was kind of cool is that several places I've read, historians are saying people should keep journals of what's going on right now.
Yes.
And I've attempted to do that, and I was very, very, very good about it for the first month or so, and then I've wandered off. And not that I am having a particularly difficult time at all, but I realized one time, I was like, okay, I realized part of the challenge of doing this is that it means you need to sit down and spend some time with these feelings in a way that you may not want to. And I wonder sometimes when you come to writing your stories and your novels, during the parts that are difficult, do you find that after that day, it's a much harder session of writing, so to speak, to step away from than it may have been the day before?
Yes, what a good question. I find that the book started in March, and I have a lot more hindsight, even just as recently as March. March, we were all confused. So I try to show that confusion, but with a little bit more hindsight, so I can write about it with more equanimity. Because I know I'm moving a story forward. This is both emotion and craft of how to write a book. And I know where I'm going. So the themes are about endurance and the perseverance and commitment and love. It's continuing this book that on Ocean Boulevard, those are the themes. I see this as a continuation of that. And I think what's reassuring for me, Harold, and I hope will be for my readers, is the cycle of life. This is another summer. The turtles have come in. The birds are migrating through. There's a reassurance in that we will get through this. And I think the kindness that one individual shows to another is important. That no one lives alone through this. We go through this together. And I think that's important.
Well, I would have to say I want to thank you for your kindness for spending so much time with us today.
Thank you.
And wrap things up, I've actually managed to track down the family that still owns the beach cottage that we visited when I was a kid. And they said, please come have a look at it. Now, of course, it won't be much like what I remember, but just a chance to revisit that and hopefully reconnect. It'll be interesting to see. And I don't know that I would have done that had I not gone down one of my many wormholes while looking up information about Mary.
I have to say, how cool. That is so great. And actually the Low Country series that you mentioned, I wrote, it's about a grandmother who has a house in Sullivan's, a beach house. And she called her granddaughters home because she has to sell. And I think that's a situation a lot of people are finding themselves in now, is that with taxes or age or illness or whatever, they can't keep up the house that everyone used to gather at. So we're finding, whether it's a ranch or a beach house or a mountain house or just a farm, but a farm, that the young people are losing those touchstones, like you talked about, someplace with a great memory. And I think that's why I wrote that series, Summer Girls, is because I wanted that reaction of the girls. What do you mean you're selling? You can't sell this place. And that's reality.
You know, it must be something about the art. We all, I guess, I think in this world have this mutual concept or construct that summertime is always a time of possibility. And it's also a time of connection. And it's, you know, if we're going to let ourselves have any kind of a break, it's in the summertime, it seems.
Exactly.
You just made me think of a really great French film I highly recommend called The Summer Hours. And it's all about a mother, a matriarch, letting her family know what she wants them to do with her home and her possessions once she passes away from a terminal illness. And it's a beautiful film. And it ends with the young people of the family having a last hurrah in the house. So
that's the series. You just gave away the plot.
no. I'm sure it's going to be, you know, like they often say, it's not the story, but how it's about the story.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that I am really grateful for this chance to talk to you and also read what you've written, because it really has, in a very easy way, made me explore so many cool ideas in these past few days. And I'm grateful.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Look forward to seeing the next book, because I have to say I've enjoyed them so much. But what I really appreciate is that you have a way of letting us all know that we can do something about such an important topic as our world.
Thank you.
In a way that is palatable, it's not a hammer, and it also reminds us of why we care.
Well, I think that's the gist of the connection, is the gist of all the books that I write. And I think it's really told, even though it's set against these important issues, it's really about, that's what families do, isn't it? That's what the connection from one human to another. And I think that's what makes it a novel and not a nonfiction, is it has the emotion and the passion. And I also say to people who are trapped indoors and they can't get to the beach, you will get to the beach in this book.
We will, and it will be there. It always has been. It'll be there long after we're gone. And I find some kind of strange comfort in the fact that it'll outlive me, but I think that's a good thing. And your stories are going to live for a long time as well, so thank you.
Thank you, Harold. Thank you so much.
Well, on the next book.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
Bye-bye. And thank you, everybody, for spending some time with us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Please know that if you want to read any and all of Mary Alice Monroe's books, we have them in several formats. You can go through our website at SJCPLS.org and place them on hold or give us a call. Thank you, folks. Bye-bye.
Bye. Hello, everybody. Cosmo and I both ask you to like, share, and comment, and read and read and read. Thank you.
Thank you, Cosmo.